We have 9 new managers now in 2026, now that Warren Schaeffer has decided he would be the one to take on the Rockies job. We're going to talk about all 9 of those. We're going to talk about the some of the deals that happened this week. We actually had some deals, which is good, and ahead of the winter meetings. And we're going to talk about our favorite team and how things are looking right now at this point in the offseason, the New York Mets. It's This Week in Baseball. We finished the podcast last week, and we kind of got into a subject about the best player. I think I brought this up. The best player in the Hall of Fame who never won an MVP. And I'm a little embarrassed that I forgot that I wrote an article a year and a half ago. Wasn't that, though? The article was on the players, the MVPs not in the Hall of Fame.
Right, so you sort of did the mirror side of this.
So this is the other side, and so I hadn't written an article on that. And when I went in and looked, and we took a look at, like some of the stuff that's there, and I didn't even know how you rate the guys as it really became. Like, if he's a Hall of Famer, who am I going to say is a better Hall of Famer than the other guy?
Right. It's a list. Ultimately, it's a list of guys that are really, really good players that just happen to not win an MVP. And I think, I think trying to rank them and say, it's like how do you say, like, Derek Jeter and Ozzie Smith, one's definitively better than the other?
But I will say, when I saw this list of guys who didn't make, and you mentioned 2 of them right there, Derek Jeter and Ozzie Smith, there were a lot of middle infielders or guys that, I shouldn't say that, and guys that didn't hit a lot of home runs. So I think, you have Tony Gwynn in there, Wade Boggs in there.
Right, because those guys probably...
So that's what got you the MVP.
Right, because those guys probably by modern metrics had seasons that should have won an MVP, but because, there was a guy that hit 40 home runs and he didn't hit 260, well, we got to give him the MVP. He hit 40 home runs. That's like the most important thing, because not anybody can do that.
I guess I'm surprised that Eddie Murray, who was a power hitter, 500 home runs, didn't make it. And Manny Ramirez, I guess some of the great years he had, he just played when other guys had great years, but Manny Ramirez certainly hit plenty of home runs. He had 555 of them. So, I'm a little surprised when the guy who's got that many homers doesn't ever
Piazza never got a MVP.
Right.
He's another
second twice.
Right, but he never got one, and nobody would say, or Wade Boggs never got one. So a lot of the times it's like guys that were really good hitters, but maybe not a guy that was going to lead the league in home runs. And then if you're not going to lead the league in home runs, like, it was just really hard to win the MVP back then. Nowadays, look at last season. Cal Raleigh had a ton of home runs, but he was not going to beat Aaron Judge for the MVP.
Yeah, don't you think someday you're going to go back and you look at Cal Raleigh's 2025 season? Because the guy hit 60 home runs,
right?
And he's the catcher, and he's who the heck won that year?
Or Judge having a historic run, where, like, I think I saw some crazy chart that was looking at Judge and Ohtani over the last 4 seasons, and Judge over the last 4 seasons has an OPS plus of 209.
That's unbelievable.
Right, he's putting up the greatest run of offensive season since Barry Bonds.
It's hard when you're in the middle of it, right, to sort of get stock of how amazing this whole run is.
Right, when you're looking at peaks, this is going to go down with the Bonds giant peak in 01 to 04, the Albert Pujols peak, where he had that run at those first 8 years in St. Louis, where if you haven't looked at those first seasons in St. Louis for Pujols, go look at them. You kind of forgot how good he was.
From the day one.
Right, Mike Trout for those first, like that's the kind of run he's having right now. And the problem is that if you're a guy that wants to win the AL, the NL, the MVP, you've got Judge doing that over in the AL, and you've got Ohtani doing that over here in the NL. So you might have another situation here where there's going to be a bunch of guys that don't win MVP, really not through any fault of their own. You have another upswing on this list where you're going to be like...
They could still be Hall of Famers like Jose Ramirez.
Did you ever...
I think there's a guy that would be right in that category.
Has has Corey Seager won an MVP? Has Cody Bellinger? You have these guys that are going to probably be Hall of Famers. Soto.
Cody Bellinger did, I think.
Has Soto won a Hall?
No.
Soto could be the type of guy that never gets an MVP, and he's a Hall of a slam dunk first ballot Hall of Famer already, pretty much.
Yeah. So, but hitting the home runs back then certainly made the difference in getting there. So I mentioned that we had some managers. We had 9 new managers altogether with Warren Schaeffer of the Rockies taking one for the team, literally.
They named him the interim manager for 2026, which I think is interesting.
He was interim manager,
right.
And so now he's got the job for next year.
Oh, okay. So they gave him, but did they give him a full contract, or did they give him with a season?
I don't know how long the season is. I know that who was it? Kurt Suzuki got 1 year in with the Angels. I don't know if they gave him 1 year. They had to give him more than 1 year. Who would do that?
Right. I mean, it's got to be tough when you're Kurt Suzuki, when you're on a
this is
1 year
Schaeffer.
deal. Well, Kurt Suzuki's on a 1 year deal, and the
Right.
Angels haven't made the playoffs in 11 seasons. That kind of is a
Make the playoffs or you're gone.
right. That's kind of what it feels
Be my
like.
pleasure, thank you. Well, and I think Warren Schaeffer, probably has more than a year. It's certainly going to take more than a year to fix the Rockies.
Exactly.
And the other guys that made it, if you've forgotten, it just surprised me that we've had this much. We mentioned Suzuki, Skip Schumacher in Texas, replacing Bruce Bochy, Tony Vitello, the Wunderkind from college coming in by Buster Posey for the Giants. Craig Albernaz was given the Orioles job just last week. Derek Shelton's going to be up in Minnesota with another financially challenged team. Good luck. Blake Butera is going to manage the Nationals. Walt Weiss in Atlanta. And Craig Stammen just got the Padres job, and he's been in that organization for a while.
So we got a lot of new managers that are going to be in.
Almost a third.
Right. So I think you're going to see a lot less of people talk about managers moving around this offseason. I don't think there's a ton of guys that are going to be on the immediate hot seat. If I could think about guys,
it won't be Ollie Mormall. They just gave him a 2-year deal.
Right.
The guy I don't like, he always gets.
Honestly, one of the only guys that immediately like people that I could see being on the hot seat if things go wrong. There's only two guys that immediately come to mind, two jobs where I could see there being problems. Detroit, just because if that team is slow out of the gate.
Okay, I don't know. I think AJ Hinch is.
I think he's okay, but
that.
I'm just saying,
okay.
like that's a team, and I think Carlos Mendoza.
I agree with you.
I think
the tide could turn on Carlos Mendoza very quickly.
Right,
I have the same feeling.
Right. I don't Ottavino. I don't really we're going into that stuff a little early, but I don't buy into the whole Ottavino.
No, I don't either.
But I think it's set up where if things don't go well, he's a very easy scapegoat to have in this situation.
Correa becomes your new manager,
and just right.
I mean, they brought this young guy in who's analytically driven, but able to connect. We'll talk about him a little bit more later. So I think he's one of them, though.
Right. So, but I think going back,
Aaron Boone, as always, is on the hot seat.
Except he's not really because they never get rid of him.
Yeah, well, or Cashman either, for that matter.
Right.
So.
But moving on to the signings, I think what we saw this week is pitching is going to be at a premium this offseason because we saw 2.5, 2.25 big moves this week. I'm not sure how much we're going to give. I guess we'll just talk about it first because I'm not sure how much we can say Ryan Helsley signing with the Orioles is a big move as he signs there for 2 years and $28 million.
Your first thought was, wow, $14 million a year. But when you think about it, Edwin Diaz got $20 million. He's sort of that. He and Hader had the $20 million a year contract for 5 years, about $100 million, give or take. And so this is 14 for only 2 years. And they really couldn't afford to go with the Orioles, and we think that they're going to have a chance to turn around this year. With Felix Bautista, who's not going to be ready to start the season, they can't do this again.
Right. We knew they had to go and get a guy. He was terrible with the Mets. He did kind of start figuring it out, when I say legitimately, at the very end.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. I'm not worried that Ryan Helsley is never going to be good again. I don't think that.
He was terrible with the Mets.
Really bad with the Mets. It's one of the things, the worst deals David Stearns made, and you kind of feel bad for him because it's not like he's a bad pitcher. He just pitched really bad.
I mean, I don't feel bad for him because I would say he is one of, I hate to put this, but he was one of the biggest reasons why the Mets did not have success down the stretch.
That deal was made, Met fan. When that deal was made, they brought in Ryan Helsley to send.
I was excited, and
darn right you
were. Right, and he was absolutely awful with
He
us.
was darn terrible.
Right, so I don't feel bad. That's why I don't feel bad.
And he was never coming back to New York. Right?
No,
that's
God.
Like you can't. I'm sorry. That's ground we can't go back over again.
Right, because the first time he had any issues, Met fans would have been losing their minds of how we could have re-signed this guy because he was that bad with us.
But Sonny Gray, and he came in a trade for 2 hard throws, so they got some assets going forward, and they're also going to pay him. The Red Sox $41 million for 1 season. And, it used to be $40 million seasons with like Verlander or Scherzer. Now it's only 1 year.
Right. So I think that jacks up the price in this situation because I think if you're Sonny Gray, you don't really want to have to go into another offseason looking to make a deal. But for the Red Sox, I kind of get why you go with a 1 year deal here in this situation because as much as you're a team that's looking to contend, you're also a team that's in like this weird transition period. Now. You're both a win now and a transition team at like the same time.
I think there's a lot of talent on that team. I think when you got Crochet now, and Sonny Gray, and you got Brian Bayo. All of a sudden, you've got a really strong top 3 guys, and you've got a team that can score runs.
But that was they didn't score runs last year.
Yeah, not as much as they should have. That's for sure.
Right. So like I think that going and getting Sonny Gray is great for them. It puts them in a position where they're saying, "Hey, we're here to compete with literally the rest of the AL East because every other team in that division it is at least okay."
Well, and they did that before the Blue Jays gave Dylan Cease $210 million for 7 years. By the way,
right, which is really just feels like the Blue Jays go, "Okay, we're going to do you one better." Exactly. As they go out, and I'd say they get one of probably the top 2 premium free agent arms right now.
Yeah,
and
he's remarkably consistent. I don't know if you look at Cease's stats, but basically you can plug him in for doing about 200 innings, about 200 strikeouts. He's gonna give few base runners and all that. Good whip. Just a solid.
And it's wild to
pitcher.
think about where the Blue Jays were at the start of last season with their starting rotation, where Kevin Gausman is their number 1. If you watch that team, then go on to make the playoffs, and now he's your number 3 pitcher. They made the World Series, and he's like your 3rd starter now because you've got
you're elevating a Savage
and
above him.
I kind of the Blue Jays basically did in the postseason.
Yeah. Well, he certainly was, and he pitched that way too, and deserved that. Yeah.
And I think I saw some wild statistic where like 5 of the last 7 Dylan Cease seasons would have more strikeouts than anybody else in Blue Jays history or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Just like this is a huge signing for them. And I think it's also huge because it's a guy that's taken off the market, and I think it now means Framber Valdez is about to get a fat contract for somebody.
What I always think, going, how does Framber's got to go? Oh yeah, here we go.
I don't have to negotiate against anybody.
Exactly.
The only team where I can't see Framber signing is the Astros.
Yeah, that's interesting, because he's been linked to, and we'll talk about the Mets. I mean, that's, when it comes to throwing a lot of money at somebody, Steve Cohen has a reputation for doing that.
The Dodgers are doing their thing where they talk about signing everybody. They're like, yeah, we could sign Kyle Tucker. Yeah, what about Cody Bellinger?
Probably could sign Framber, too,
What are all these new Japanese players? Yeah, let's go them. Apparently Tatsuya Amai.
Come on over.
Except for Tatsuya Amai, who came out and said, no, I don't want to sign with the Dodgers. I want to beat with the Dodgers.
And of course, the Mets are focused on him. Yeah, we want the guy who wants to beat the Dodgers.
Yeah, we like him.
I think any team would probably say that. That's the guy that we want. But yeah, I think, interesting about the pitchers that were signed, and there's only 3 of them, but 2 of them as starters, they all go to the American League East. And so, and obviously they all pitched in the National League last year. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of interesting that those pitchers are out, and it doesn't really overall weaken the National League. But if you're a team that competes with the teams they were on, you're not sad to see those guys go.
Right. You're not sad at all. And we might as well get into the Mets here because we're looking at them after their disastrous campaign here in 2025.
It gets worse over time. Like it was a tough season. It was tough to watch. But now that I hear people talk about it, it seems even worse than it was when it happened.
It's actually kind of strange because I feel like other people are much more negative on the season than I am. Like maybe because we accepted they were a flawed team so quickly after that initial start. Like we were talking about them being a flawed team in like June. We were just like, ooh, we're nervous about this.
And the pitching last season got off to such an amazing start that you said,
and we were
begging, can't last.
Right, we were saying that the whole time. So we kind of
last.
Right, it didn't last. And I think one of the things that we were both talking about, and we've seen the organization do, is there had to be a change in the coaching staff. And they went out and they changed the coaching staff. It's almost entirely new across the board.
Yeah, I mentioned Carlos Mendoza's heir apparent, that in Kai Correa, who's the new bench coach, and all of 30-something years old.
But they brought in Justin Williard as their new pitching coach, Dan McKinney as his assistant, Troy Snitker as hitting coach.
There's a lot of hitting coaches.
Replacing the truly much maligned Eric Chavez, because, man, did the Met fans hate him. I think there was actually some evidence to it didn't seem like they did great under him, so I understand why. Yeah. We have new first base and outfield coaches. We got new third base coaches, new catching coaches.
Did you hear the whole thing with the Richardson, the first base coach, who the Mets ended up letting go? So now
we talked about it a little bit,
but apparently they offered him more than he got anywhere else, and he wanted more,
and then he signed for less.
And I don't know if he signed. All I know is the Mets are like, whatever it was, that's too much, and enough of you,
and
off you go, and we'll see you next year.
And I don't think. I think the fact that the Met fans were talking so much about a first base coach does show the general level of frustration within the fan base at missing the playoffs last season, especially after they sort of had a miracle run the year before. And so now you enter a very, very uncertain 2026 where like we were just talking about with the Red Sox, they are a team in transition, and they got a break last season that they're unlikely to get this season, which is that the Atlanta Braves just sort of stumbled and fell flat the entire season.
Which year would you target if you're a Met fan to try to steal a division? Let's see, the year the Braves fall flat on their face.
Well, I feel like it's tough to say steal a division when the Phillies won like 94 something games.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You don't have one team to beat. Is what I'm saying.
Right. What I'm saying is that steal a division would be like, oh, both the Braves and the Phillies stumbled, and you win like the division with like 91 wins. Right. So in some ways, all it means is that it just places more importance on the Braves games next season in those head-to-head series, because you can safely assume that, look, the Phillies are going to lose some pitchers, but I think they're going to go out and spend big this offseason for one more run with this group.
I think so, too.
The Braves are going to be better. The Marlins had a plucky season last year, but they're the Marlins.
I said this about the Marlins, okay? So if they think they can compete, and I tend to think Clayton McCullough is telling the organization that we can compete, that they're not going to trade any of those pitchers.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, they're plucky hitters that were getting better. All of a sudden, they're a real pain in the neck. If they're a 500 team or something like that, or a little better,
and the Nationals had a bad season last year, so if they come on on the upswing, that could be a much more competitive NL East in the 2026.
Tougher division than it was this year.
Tougher division.
Which Mets didn't do that great.
Right. So the Mets had a lot of work, I think, coming into the offseason, and well, they've already started it because they made a gigantic trade when we're looking at it, as they traded longtime outfielder Brandon Nimmo to the Texas Rangers for Marcus Semien, which is a giant shakeup in the fabric of this team on a lot of different levels.
Well, it speaks to I did not realize how good a defensive player Semien was.
He's very good.
He's consistently good. Won the Gold Glove this year. Whether you believe it's deserved at 35 or not is another story. But the point is that he's a tremendous fielder. He is a terrific base runner even at age 35. They basically put his base running stuff out there going, this guy who's obviously not as fast as he was, just makes the right play. And the little things, right, that David Stearns was saying, I want to have a better defense. I can't go in. We can't go in with the kind of defense we played last year. Nimmo was a minus in left field, let's face it.
Right. It was always so strange to me that people would be like, Nimmo is a great defender, because I'm like, okay, this is one of those situations where like the eye test feels like it conflicts with the metrics, because whenever I watched Brandon Nimmo play the outfield, it looked uncomfortable.
Well, let's talk about Nimmo a little bit. When he, he's a guy who played 10 years with the Mets, drafted by the team.
He was on his way to being an all-time Met.
He was gonna probably have his number retired. I think that is out the window now because he's not going to play
his whole career with
But
him.
I think he'll be in the Met Hall of Fame one day. They put Lee Mazzilli in there, so I gotta believe that Brandon Nimmo gets in there because he was a better player than Lee Mazzilli.
And Nimmo put together a lot of good seasons, but he as a player was profiling less and less as an outfielder and more
The best thing he did
DH.
defensively was it a 2022 under Buck Showalter when he played center field because they didn't have his center fielder?
Right.
And he outperformed everybody's wildest expectations in center field, which gave people the wrong idea that he was a really good defensive player when he was a game guy who got it done that season and never was as good as that.
Right, and injuries in time have now further sapped him, especially because I think he has the plantar fasciitis.
He's fought that for years.
Right, and that's the kind of thing that just it's the kind of thing that just
Flares
kills
up.
your ability.
And he he was a guy who came up and couldn't stay on the field. He was hurt early
and he's
in
been
his
much
career.
better about that over the last bunch of his career. He was a little banged up last year, but it wasn't any kind of noticeable
moniker. And I noticed that in his Met career, the Mets were 532 and 534, so under 500 for his Met career, which actually surprised me because he came up during that run in
right, but then they were really bad after that.
They lost a lot of games in some of those years that they weren't any good, and that offset the good years that he was on the team for. So I think it was a huge deal that I am in favor of. I think Semien and Lindor is kind of a juicy combination in the middle of the infield.
Well, when you look at the infield, and I think as a Met fan, one of the things that we talked about how bad their defense was last year, especially on the right side of the field.
Yeah,
you had sort of the Bermuda Triangle effect between Pete Alonso, Juan Soto, and the rotating cast that was at second base, where whoever that was the best defender of those three, but it's like kind of like when you have like a tiny anchor attached to a giant ship that's not really helping do anything. Like those other two were so just let's be honest, not good that a slightly above average second baseman wasn't helping how rough the defense was over there. And I gotta think how bad the defense was contributing to how much the pitchers struggled down the second half.
Well, that's a good point, and I think I was having a back and forth with a fellow writer, Bill Schaeffer, who's written a couple of really great baseball books, and he's a Met fan through and through, and was sort of getting on the idea that Pete is better than people think at first base, and Soto was sort of his problem because of the laconic nature of what Soto is, right? You talk about the eye test. When you watch Soto, he kind of does everything kind of low key, doesn't really, so it doesn't look like sometimes he doesn't hustle out every single ball to first base when he hits. When that bothers baseball fans that have been around for a while, it really bugs them that
is
a baseball thing. It's legit. It's there.
Like that's one of those. Like to me, that's one of those things where I'll be honest. If you're a fan, if you're a fan that goes, I look at Juan Soto and Pete Alonso, and I'm going to say I want Pete Alonso on my team over Juan Soto because he has heart and he has effort. You're stupid. Because here's why. Because when you look at pick one season out of Pete Alonso's career and say you want that over basically any season of Juan Soto's career. And you literally can't.
If they played the same position, you could make that argument.
But it's like, so do I want a bad defender who is a worse offensive player, or a bad offensive player who is a better offensive player than that other guy in virtually every category?
I think I mentioned that. Juan Soto's career ops plus is 160. This year, his ops plus was 160.
Yeah.
So
has Pete had a 160 season? No. Has Pete sniffed 150? No. Right. Okay. Case closed.
Yeah.
Well, so if you're gonna dog Juan Soto for effort,
the infield, so
right. But if you're gonna say
you got Semien there, and so if you have to replace one of those two guys, you're not replacing Soto unless you move him to left field, which is a possibility.
You're not replacing Soto. He's
not replacing Soto,
offensive player on the roster.
He's got a contract for the rest of your life,
right?
And then
right, your life too. let's not kid ourselves here.
First base wise, the Mets are really, I think, struggling with can they have Pete be the primary first baseman?
No.
Or is there some way he can be a 100-game DH or 110-game DH and play first base a couple of times a week or once a week?
I think the idea of entertaining this fantasy of having some guy play 60 games at first base and 100 games at DH is exactly that. It's a fantasy. That's not going to work. What kind of first base? Think about it. What first baseman would you be happy with for 100 games of the season? But you wouldn't want him out there for 162.
Injury not being a part.
For injury notwithstanding, right? Really, okay, no, I'm going to sign a guy that I only want out there some of the time. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, and so the Mets aren't talking about. I'm the one who's sort of mentioning this, going, I don't know how, because it was Scott Boras, his agent, that came out and said, Pete would DH. I still think Pete Alonso basically wants to be a full-time DH and never play first base again. I think that would be hard for him. I think that's his best path to getting a fair contract, but he's not going to get as much as if he were a first baseman. The problem is the people who might want to pay him that, there may not be that many, and that's $30 million
right.
Aren't in a place where he wants to play.
Right, exactly. That might be his big issue, is what team is willing to pay him to play first base right now. Because that's what
the Rockies say, come on out and play first base. We'll give you $33 million a season for 5 years. Is
that better?
Nobody else is going to give him that.
Right. Is that better than playing the DH for the Mets?
Right.
For less money.
You say you want to win, and then you look at that situation. That's a tough situation.
So I think that's why the infield, when you look at the Mets infield right now, they sort of get an incomplete because we don't know what they're doing at first base. If you look at,
we don't 100% know what they're doing at third base either at this point.
I am operating under the assumption that Brett Beatty is the starting third baseman until I am told otherwise.
Well, Mark Vientos has been working out all winter on his defense really hard at third base and first base.
So he better work at first. He better work out at first base,
so he can be the versatile infielder that they need.
Brett Beatty, I think, to me, earned the starting third base job this season to be there unquestioned. That like he hit well enough last season. He's the best defensive third baseman they have on the roster. Like the difference between him and Vientos at third base defensively is staggering.
Yeah, and as good a defender as Luis Angel Acuna is, and I think he could play third base as well. I don't think you want his bat at third base.
No, Beatty actually had a solid offensive season, especially when you just look at his second half. He was very solid in the second half.
But bringing in Semien ended the idea that Beatty was going to have that hopefully
that's why
throwing bat at second base.
That's why I'm saying no. Brett Beatty is your third baseman going into this season. So you've got Semien, Lindor, and Beatty. You're hoping that now having a much better consistent presence at third base and a better consistent presence at second helps revitalize Lindor, who had a down year defensively last year.
I agree.
And so that also didn't help the Mets, but I got to think it was probably not helped by the fact that I have to think he was compensating for what was around him at points.
Well, and he was injured.
Right.
You know, when he had the toe injury, I think he wasn't right for a long time, even though he had played all the way through it, because the guy just plays through everything. He had, the stories came out this week in the New York metro area about issues between both he and Soto, and the ongoing issue apparently between he and Jeff McNeil, who had a screaming match between he and McNeil in the locker room about an error that McNeil made. And by the way, this is all secondhand, third-hand reporting.
Right.
They don't really know. You never know what really happened there.
I actually totally buy that happening between McNeil and Lindor because they've never gotten along. We all
So
remember
it seems.
the argument in the dugout tunnel about the squirrel or whatever.
The raccoon.
The raccoon, right? Yeah. So I think McNeil has always sort of had that presence within the clubhouse. I'm going to be stunned if at this point, especially with the trade for Semien, if he's on the roster next season. Which, if you remove Nimmo and you remove McNeil, you have now greatly changed the vibe of that clubhouse.
And I think that's an excellent point, because there's some talk that your left fielder is McNeil next year. I'm like, well, why would you want to put McNeil in left field? What did he do?
You could do better
to do than because he doesn't hit for power.
He didn't hit for average.
Didn't really hit for average. Didn't have the on base average. He's a capable fielder. Like great. He's versatile. He can play center. He can play left. He can play second, and he's pretty. Okay.
Right. He's now a utility in vibes guy, except the vibes are bad.
Well said. And so I think, and I don't dislike McNeil. I just think if there's the problem is he gets
I just
paid
like
a lot
watching
of money.
him play right now.
He gets paid a lot of money. So who's going to take his $15 million he's got?
Dump him. You're dumping him.
Eat some salary and let him go someplace else and wish him luck. And I think that's probably right to your point about the vibe needing to continue to change there.
Right. And that's why when you look at the outfield's even harder to judge than the infield, because the only guy you really know is there for sure is Soto, and you've now got a question mark in left field and a question mark in center. Will a kid come up and fill one of those positions? You have to assume they're going to sign somebody. Is it Kyle Tucker to go play left field? Is it Cody Bellinger to come play center? I don't know who they're going to sign, but they're going to have to sign someone to play the outfield.
Okay, and that's a good thought to carry forward, because I went on record as saying I think it's going to be hard for the Mets to fix everything in this offseason. Like, we're going to fix all the things that are wrong with us, every unit.
No. You're going to go into 2026 with really young players at a lot of positions in your team.
One way.
Right, and I think that's
you're going to go in with Jeff McNeil playing left field every day and going, oh, well, that's a 1 foot in the past.
Right, I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to not. You're not going to. I'm very hopeful they're not going to.
You got Tyrone Taylor, but they're not going into the season intending him to play 120 games. In
I don't think they're going into the season with the intention that Jeff McNeil or Tyrone Taylor plays 100+ games in the outfield for them next season.
They want this Carson Bench to play. It's a long way for him to go to be the starting outfielder. Forget about center field, which is where they want him for the Mets this year. But I guess he's going to have a chance in camp to
right. And we've
compete.
seen, and you know what we've seen with guys is sometimes it's worth to let them come up to the majors for 2 weeks. Some guys will just come up and they'll just start hitting, and you're like, okay, you know what? Yeah, you could stay up here and play. Sometimes they can't, and you send them back down for more seasoning. That doesn't mean they're not going to be a player, but sometimes it's worth to just be like, you might be ready at 22 now.
You wouldn't go and try to bring Jared Kelenic back in?
Absolutely not.
Okay, just asking.
But I think I wouldn't be surprised to see one outfielder signing and then Carson Bench in the other outfield spot. I think that feels like something the Mets would do this offseason, because especially now with Dylan Cease off of the starting pitcher market, I don't think the Mets are going to go out and spend premium dollars on a starting pitcher.
Well, hold that thought, because we still have all these infielders that we haven't done anything with, because we didn't mention Ronnie Mauricio. Okay, what's going to happen to Ronnie Mauricio?
I think Met fans are too in love with the idea of Ronnie Mauricio.
Are they going to trade him just because they can't figure out what
He's
to
our
do
new
with him?
Miguel Andujar.
Can he play first base?
He's our Miguel Andujar. You know how the Yankee fans used to be like, oh, well, what if we trade somebody? We'll give you Miguel Andujar.
Like say, this is the year.
Right, this is the year Ronnie Mauricio turns into something.
You've got him, and you got Acuna, and you've got this young Jet Williams who seems to be ready to play Major League Baseball. What are you going to – he's a young, exciting player.
I think the Mets
can't have him come up as a bench player. You did that with Acuna, although he might actually be a bench player.
I think the Mets would love to package some of these guys together in a deal and go trade those guys, one of those young pitchers they have, whether it's Sproat or Tong, and just go get somebody, but who? Like who you get? Yeah, sure, you might want to trade all these guys, but you need a partner to dance with when it comes to a trade. And who's going to necessarily want to give up, say, a proven pitcher for that package of guys?
Or you're going, and this is why the defense becomes important to the Mets, obviously for any team, but in particular in the infield, because Framber Valdez seems like such an obvious thing now to me. That this is the guy you got to go and get because there's not anything else out there like it.
Right, but at the same time, you're a team that we were just talking about how absolutely god-awful the vibes were last season, right? How that
No, it was Framber because that weird thing happened last year. Is he a bad guy? I don't know that.
I would like to think I would have concerns about my team vibes if I'm signing a pitcher that intentionally crossed up his own catcher to hit him with a pitch.
I am sure that when Mets get far enough to consider signing Framber Valdez, they will understand whether.
I'm just saying that's not a
proceed if they weren't 100% sure that that's not.
I'm just saying that's not exactly a calculation you have to make with any other pitcher you sign.
That's true, but I think they've got to make you can't go into the season with the pitching staff you have right now and expect that you're going to actually
take
compete.
Dylan Cease off the market, it's now going to make a bidding war for Framber Valdez and your general manager in why am I blanking on
Bobo and Stearns?
Right, and Stearns isn't the type of guy to get into a bidding war with the first starting pitcher to sign Framber to some mega contract.
Well, and then you're trying to do it by trade to your point, and whether you're going to try to trade for his old guy Freddie Peralta with the Brewers or somebody like that. There are guys that could be dangled out there. Joe Ryan of the Twins is another guy who's been
Pablo
floated
Lopez
about.
Could be traded.
These guys. So those are where those assets in your Mauricios and your Acuna Jr. By the way, he got not Acuna Jr. Luis Acuna got hit in the hand last week. He missed like one game, and now he's got like home runs, and he's batting 980.
He's amazing.
So he's having the winter that you hope he would have.
It's just interesting.
Which is for trade value.
Kind of sitting here before this offseason, looking at it going, okay, we know the Met team is going to be different this offseason. It is not necessarily going to be complete different, but from where we are here today, we're recording this on November 30th, to where we're going to be when we start the season, it's going to be really interesting to kind of talk about this before the season starts, being like, okay, what does the roster look like now?
Right, because we could say right now, okay, your number one pitcher for the Mets right now. Who would be your number one right now?
Who is your opening day starter next season?
Right with no trade.
With no trade, you would have to, by performance from last year, you'd give it to Peterson.
You might, or Clay Holmes.
You'd probably give it to one of those guys because you wouldn't give it to Senga, and you maybe would give it to Minaya, depending on how he felt.
That seems like out of respect.
That seems out of respect more because it's like you still are worried that Minaya can't sustain himself in games. And you're not going to want to. He had a problem and you guys already pitched short at the beginning of the season anyway.
So you've got those kinds of pitchers, and none of them really profile as a number one. If you're asking any Met fan, by the way,
right? But making your off-season plan go sign a number one is like, yeah, sure, and basically
that's Framber Valdez,
right? He's the only guy on the market,
and you don't have to trade for him. All you got to do is overpay him.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Mets are fine with that. This is what we do.
Except that's not at that position.
And this gentleman, the Pobo Stearns, doesn't want to give like any smart leader is going to. I don't want to give a pitcher any longer a contract than I absolutely have to. The 7 years that Dylan Cease got, I don't think David Stearns is going to give 7 years to.
So if Framber, and now that's been out there, Framber's like, well, I would like 7 years.
And somebody might go, okay, I guess we'll and the Phillies like, we'll take him for 7 years.
So not at least they wouldn't want this guy for 7 years. I think there's two guys on the market. This
Ranger Suarez.
I don't think they would sign him for 7 years. There's only two pitchers in baseball I think the Mets would consider signing for 7 years.
Yeah.
And they're not
Scuba.
Neither one of them. Right, they're not getting that.
Crochet in there too, by the way.
It was 3 for 7 years, and none of them are coming to New York. So
and above the kids, right? We didn't talk about the kids at all. But it seems McLean will be that other guy in our
McLean's 100%.
Is he a number one? I just don't want him to be this year number one.
No, I don't
want him to be number one this year.
I think he's gonna be in the rotation. For sure. I think there's a chance maybe Tong or Sproat.
I don't think either of those other two guys are going to be in the rotation, and I think there's a pretty good chance that one of them won't be there.
Right, but they're
going to be traded.
There's a world where they could pitch themselves into that. But it's unlikely, but it's possible. But I think that for sure you're looking at that. You're thinking, okay, Senga, Peterson, Holmes, Minaya, McLean. You've got those 5 guys. You would like to add a sixth guy that's like not a throwaway
You
pitcher,
need
but like,
9 guys. I keep
I'm
telling
just
you.
saying, you need to add a top end guy, and then you can fill out the back with other
You need
dudes.
your
The
Griffin
Tyler
Cannings,
McGills
not
of the
that he's the
world.
one, but those kinds of guys, that are
But
going to
getting
fill
a
out your
number
roster.
one, yeah, sure, I would love to do that. And you're going to need to go get relievers. Are you going to sign Edwin Diaz?
Yeah, the more time goes on and they don't sign him, the less I think they're going to sign him. But I think they will. If they don't sign Diaz, they'll sign Suarez of the
Or
Padres.
they'll go sign Williams.
Robert Suarez, right?
Yeah.
right. Or Williams.
They're not going to not sign one of those 3 guys.
I think you're right. They're certainly, and they still need a lot of work in the bullpen.
And they'll still do work, but really, who's they're signing with the relievers is so hard to figure out. I'm not like it's like bullpen is sort of just like, okay, I expect David Stearns to roll the dice and hopefully it works out this year. That's kind of how bullpens work.
And you mentioned Carlos Mendoza before, and I think one of the things that has emerged, and Ottavino's criticism notwithstanding, is that Carlos's desire to or penchant for pulling the starters quickly that really ended up overtaxing his bullpen. Early in the season when the starters were going deeper into games and the bullpen was humming, it all looked like it was working together, and we kind of thought it was a little bit flimsy. And it really, really came to bear because once the starters stopped going so deep in the games and you had to pitch Reed Garrett 1,000,000 times and all that stuff, their effectiveness went down the drain. You just can't have enough arms to have these relievers pitch massive innings the way the Mets relievers do.
Right, the way the way they were forced to do that at the very beginning of the season. Like there was no way we could actually expect them to like.
I mean, Clay Holmes had a nice season, but he was going 4 or 5 innings a start, and he did it all season long. He had a couple of longer runs, but that cumulatively eventually affects your team. And even though we liked what he did when he was in there, the problem is he needed to be in there longer.
Right, exactly. And none of those guys were able to do that last season.
So I guess I just worry about a world in which the options come down to Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly and foreign pitchers. I don't really know who you're
right, but I think if you're a Met fan and that's the world you're living, you have to live in the world that what the good thing about that is that's going to change next season. You're not going to sign Zach Allen this offseason and then not do anything next offseason or during the trading deadline. So you have to the idea that you're going to be able to be like, oh yes, I've assembled every player I want this offseason.
And I got them all.
Right, I got them all. Not going to happen. So I think you might have to live with maybe not getting. I personally don't really want to go out and give Framber a crazy contract because I know my team isn't done. So it doesn't make sense to lock myself into a pitcher and a giant contract when I'm still trying to figure my team out.
I would say that Stearns, if he's going to make an offer to Framber, it may not be for any more than 5 years. Now, it may be a crazy offer. Could be $200 million for 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, right. But we don't.
It's not going to be a 7-year deal.
So I could see them doing that, and I think you bring a good point up because what we're seeing now is going to be different, through the off season and even into the season. You can fix some of the stuff in movies. You can fix it in post. Well, when it comes to the Mets, you can fix it in post. Get to June and July and figure out what you need where you're lacking.
Part of the reasons we don't have dynasties like we used to anymore, and maybe aside from what the Dodgers are building over in Los Angeles, is that guys move teams too often. You're not going to be able to sort of you're not going to have a team and have year over year it's the same team. It's going to change. Look at the Blue Jays are going to look like a completely different team next season potentially, and they were the World Series team last year.
They'll be different.
They'll be different.
I hope they'll be a lot the same.
Right. But if Bo Bichette's not there, and now you've got Dylan Cease and Trey Savage,
you look different. It's a different vibe.
You're a different vibe, and you're a different team.
Learned that, right? Without Jose Iglesias on the team, the Mets vibe was vastly different. Not that you attribute everything to him, but that was just that team that year. It worked. It happened. It was over. Right? And you can't make that happen again.
Exactly.
By forcing it in there. So I guess there's still a lot of work to be done. I am confident that our owner will spend money. Will it go wisely and work out? Well, it didn't work out with some of the trade deadline acquisitions, by the way, thus far since David Stearns has been Pobo, have not really gone all that great. So
no,
hopefully he's just a little unlucky there, and it's not a sign of things to come. But I like the idea of building the team the way the Mets are doing it. Right, we need to be a good defensive team. We need to have everybody pulling in the right direction. That may be a little hard with a guy like Soto on the team because of just the way that he comports himself.
Except he's basically, from what I hear, he comports himself as like the professional.
Just not a rah-rah dude. That's all. And so people want that. And Aaron Judge, by the way, is not really a rah-rah dude either, but he's Aaron Judge. Judge, and he gets away with that more than than anybody else.
It seems like everybody, everybody's like, oh yeah, there's something off about Soto, except nobody ever can find somebody that actually has an issue with.
All he does is hit.
Right.
And then this year, I think I'll steal bases. What I hope happens to him in the offseason is that wherever Anthony Richardson coached him on stealing bases, I need an outfield coach to sort of help him, and maybe Kai Correa is that guy because he's a specialist there, to just say, here are the angles you could be playing, here's what you can be doing differently, because Soto was very interested in the technical aspects of what was going on. That's how he stole 38 bases for a guy who's not fast. He figured out what the technique was he needed to do to be more successful. Love to see him do that in right field.
Yeah, that'd be big.
Next week we're going to talk about. We're going to drop the podcast on Monday.
Correct. We're going to be talking about the contemporary.
Later in the day, so we're going to record in the morning. We're going to talk about the contemporary year committee voting, and to see if we're going to see if Barry Bonds actually gets in. Roger Clemens. Let's see. It's who else? Gary Sheffield. So. Those three guys know.
You're right.
Which is not fair, but that's what's going to happen. Carlos Delgado, Jeff Kent, Don Mattingly, and Dale Murphy and Fernando Valenzuela. And I just kind of feel Dale Murphy's.
I was thinking Valenzuela and Murphy are the two that jump out to me.
Valenzuela just passed away, so you have that whole emotional aspect there, and I love Fernando Valenzuela.
That feels...
And Dale Murphy, who he won those back-to-back MVPs, and if he would have
deserves
one more homer, he would have had 400, and that cost him the Hall of Fame. Do I think Dale Murphy was a Hall of Famer? It's fine if he is. By the way, I'm a bigger Hall guy. It's fine. Would I put him ahead of those other guys? No.
No, but those other guys have the big steroid issue.
So we'll talk about who, and we'll talk about their careers in our podcast next week.